Hey, everybody. Welcome to Military Monday with ClearedJobs.Net. I'm your host, Bob Wheeler, and today is November the 3rd, 2025. And we are really, really happy today to have with us a guest. We're going to talk about guards and reserve issues that are out there for those folks and how they're dealing with getting jobs and getting a good career going. We've got with us today Mr. Eric Evans. Eric has got a lot of different titles, and we're going to let him introduce himself, but really quickly, Eric is the executive director and founder of an organization called Friendly Forces. He's also runs a newsletter called the Part-Time Hitter Newsletter. And by the way, he's also a Army Reserve officer at the current time. So Eric, I gave him the big top, the high level topics there. You want to say hello to everybody?
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me here today, Bob. So I'm Eric Evans. I'm the founder, executive director of Friendly Forces, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that spotlights great employers of serving U.S. military reservists. And we help companies that want to do better implement programs that better support the reservists in their workforce. I'm also a serving Army officer in the Army Reserve, as you said. I've been in the Army Reserve for about 3 years. Before that, I was in the National Guard for the better part of a decade. I've been both officer and enlisted, Guard and Reserve. So generally, I consider myself kind of an all-around expert on all things Guard, Reserve related. And throughout my career as a Guardsman and Reservist and holding down a full-time job, I've sort of been able to see, the good, the bad, and the ugly of what I'll call industry support to reservists. And out of that is how I ended up founding Friendly Forces. As you mentioned, I also run a newsletter called Part-Time Hitter, which goes out weekly. That's kind of a collaboration between myself and some other reservists I work with that provides news, information, resources for those people who are still serving currently in the Guard and Reserve.
Yeah. Well, hey, like I said, we're really happy to have you. For those of you who are joining us live on the LinkedIn, if you are on the live broadcast of this, you can throw comments out there. I'm happy to see those. If you want to let us know who you are, where you're at. Are you in the Guard Reserves? Are you thinking about, joining the Guard or Reserves? Maybe you're active duty, going to transfer out, and you get hit up by those recruiters. This is a great time to ask some questions. If we get a chance to bring those into the discussion, we will. And if not, we can always answer them on the back end too. But yeah, give us a holler and let us know. We got some folks already chiming in with the hello and the okays type stuff. So hope you guys are all doing well. But let's go ahead and get into this stuff here, Eric. And when we were prepping for some stuff, you were just on your way up to talk to some folks up in DC about some issues. And I know we were talking, and I was in the Navy for 20 years, and I was a recruiter even, put some people in the reserves. I knew things like you, Sarah, but I never really got into the details of it. Are there still issues? Are there things that are kind of hot topics right now as far as that folks are having to deal with?
There are, especially right now. So the work Friendly Forces does is especially timely and relevant right now because of the recent nationwide domestic deployments that we're seeing from the National Guard. And that's in addition to your typical rotation schools deployments that the Guard and Reserve are doing at all times now, post 9/11, that we've been doing for the past 25 years. So yeah, I was recently on Capitol Hill to talk to some congressional staff about the work Friendly Forces does and why it's critical to service members, their families, and ultimately our military readiness and national security, because, as we're seeing now, outside of the government shutdown and those pay issues, even if everything was going the way it should be going, Guardsmen also oftentimes, Guard and Reserve oftentimes face pretty severe financial burden from these call-ups. A lot of times, depending on your job, military pay is far below what you may be making on the civilian side. So if you have to pick up and especially last minute, go on any sort of extended duty, that can cause a real hit to your monthly cash flow, right? So I have a big boy job. I live in Washington, D.C. If suddenly I need to go away for 3 weeks, 2 months, 6 months, a year, and I'm only making my Army pay, that's going to cause a problem for me and my wife, which is going to cause more problems for me. Generally for our household, right? It can be a massive difference in take home pay, and really disrupt your ability to pay your mortgage, pay for groceries. You'll have to cover down on things like childcare, pet care, whatever it may be. So your costs go up, and oftentimes your income goes substantially down. So I imagine we're probably seeing a lot of that with the guardsmen that are currently deployed now in various areas around the city. So I was on Capitol Hill to talk about that particular issue, and really just to talk to some of these folks about helping to amplify the message of Friendly Forces, because we're really the only organization that delves into this specific issue about essentially pay loss for Guard and Reserve, and the way that companies that enable us to keep serving through generous paid leave programs are actually enabling ultimately our national security, our economy, and the way that America functions. We keep the lights on, but people won't continue to serve if they're taking too big of a financial hit to do so. So that applies to people coming off of active duty who are thinking about going into the Guard or Reserve, and then people like myself who have been career reservists the whole time. I've said this many times. I would get out of the reserve pretty quickly if every time I had to report, I was losing a large chunk of my income. And that wouldn't just be my decision, but members of my household would probably have something to say about that as well. And as we've seen, as the Army knows, that the single biggest factor in if a service member will continue to serve is if they have the support of their spouse. They've found that that's the single biggest indicator of whether or not somebody stays in the military. So keeping the paychecks coming helps spouses feel secure and safe, and at the end of the day, it also helps the recruiting and retention of companies that have implemented these programs, and I would want to be seen as military friendly.
Absolutely. You know what? And thanks for the work that you're doing and for fighting that fight. It's nice. We have some people that are chiming in on the LinkedIn Live. They're saying hello. We've even got at least one person who's thanking for your service, but also she's a current recruiter, a federal government contractor recruiter. So we're not just preaching to the choir here, the people who want to hear what you talk about. We got some good folks on the other end at the hiring end that are listening to us too. So thanks for being here and listening and throwing up your comments inside the LinkedIn there. But let's go ahead and keep on chatting here, Eric. We talked about, what you've talked about what you've been doing on Capitol Hill and stuff like that and the current issues. Friendly Forces, you mentioned it. You're the executive director, you're founder of those things. It's basically, when I was looking at the website there, which is it friendlyforces.org, right? ORG?
Correct.
Yeah. Yes. If you want to check it out, it's friendlyforces.org. But on there's a lot of stuff that really does things like kind of helps to highlight companies that are doing a good job, right? You're like the folks that are really coming through for you.
Yeah. So, initially I had the idea for Friendly Forces over a decade ago. I ran into an unfortunate situation with my employer at the time, when I alerted them that I was joining the National Guard and had to go away for a period of time for my initial training. That kind of planted the idea in my head of, wouldn't it be nice if there was some sort of an open source database that could tell me on the front end, all right, what companies are going to support my military service and which companies maybe aren't quite there and maybe I shouldn't target, while I'm serving. So over time that kind of morphed into developing a framework for, okay, well, at a baseline, what does support to reservists look like? And that's kind of a layered question. You get into USERA and individual manager level education and training. But at a baseline level, what Friendly Forces looks for is companies that offer a paid military leave benefit and putting that up front so people like me can target our job searches to make sure that a company we may end up working for is aligned to our, our other job, our service. What I'd found in my job search as I was going through recruiting, hiring processes was that oftentimes the people I was talking to, who are generally, levels away from managers and HR types, didn't have the information I was looking for as far as, do you offer paid military leave? What is it? How many reservists work at your company? Most of the time they would have no idea, right? And it's not really their, well, I would say it kind of probably is their job to know, but a lot of times they wouldn't know, or they say, okay, let me find out and I'll get back to you. And they wouldn't, or they'd even give incorrect information, right? So I'm saying, oh yeah, it's fully paid, blah, blah, blah. And then you end up joining the company, you find out that that's not the case. And at that point, nobody's happy, I don't think. So the intent was to put this information out there to help reservists really key in on companies that were going to be supportive of their service. And to do that, we developed a framework for what we thought was sort of the minimal acceptable threshold of support to serving military reservists. And that goes into sort of the duration and amount of paid military leave that
I got to imagine too that some of the questions you were bringing up there, when you ask the recruiter or the hiring manager, and they want to say the right thing, or maybe they kind of feel like they know that, yeah, we're on the good side of this thing, so we will help you out. But if they don't really know, maybe it's because they don't have a lot of guardsmen or reservists in there. That maybe they have policies that have never really been kind of tested or stress tested in some ways. Those would probably be some things that, if you could find out those things, I imagine that's got to be some helpful information, right? When you're going through that interview.
Yeah, very much so. So I was just talking to a buddy about this last night. So it's very industry specific. So I'm a defense contractor in my regular job. Obviously, the defense industry is pretty attuned to reservists and their needs. They hire a lot of us specifically because of our skill sets, our backgrounds, our networks, our experiences. So because of that, they're very aware. They have a vested interest in taking care of reservists. That's not necessarily the case in other industries, kind of outside of the DC area or specific industries that are somehow tangentially connected to the military or the defense industry. What we've found generally is that a lot of companies, it's never come up before. It's just something they haven't thought about. It's never been brought to their attention. They've maybe never had a reservist working there, so it's just never come up. Or they have a policy on paper, but it was written in 1991, which was 10 years before 9/11. And the fact is, the Guard and Reserve was a very, very different beast prior to 9/11 than it is now. Prior to 9/11, we were a strategic reserve, right? So, last line of defense, not really integrated into operations. Post 9/11, we're all over the place, especially, now more than ever, but domestically, overseas, 24/7 global operations. Anywhere we have military personnel, you're going to have Guard and Reserve people there. So some companies haven't updated those policies to reflect that. We've seen quite a bit of that. And in my discussions, sort of with companies, I've noticed there are some early indicators if a company is going to be friendly to reservists or not, or if they've ever sort of thought about this before. One might be, okay, well, are there, do you have any reservists working there? A lot of companies don't have an answer to this question, or they don't know. Part of that isn't necessarily their fault. They can't force somebody to disclose whether or not they're currently serving in the Guard or Reserve. It's one of those opt-in things. But generally, what I'll do is if I'm researching a company, I'll look and see if I can find people in the Guard or Reserve who work there. If I can't find any, that's generally not a good sign. It means either they don't have very good policies in place, or they've never really made any effort to engage this community to try to get them hired. Something else that I look out for is, if when you ask a company, do they support the military? Do they support the troops? No company is going to say no. We don't support the military, or we don't support the troops. They're always going to say they do, and they might even think they do. But if their default answer is we abide by USERRA, which is the legislation that dictates how companies have to treat reservists, if that's their default answer, is that they obey the law, that they have to. I found that to generally be not a great sign that they're going above and beyond to support the community.
Yeah, so I guess red flags can be anything from like we've never thought about it to, like you said, we won't break the law, we promise. Like that's not a great.
Yeah, or that's a great question. We'll look into that.
Yeah.
Or if they give you kind of vague answers or platitudes. I fell into this trap a while back, where I was given assurances that, we'll take care of you. Anything you need, we got you. But I didn't really see any verbiage. I didn't see anything specific. And then I ended up working there, and it was not what I thought it was going to be. The support was much, much less than I was led to believe. And I know friends I've worked with have run into that exact same problem as well, where something was promised that did not turn out to be the case. So if they're giving kind of vague answers, that's generally not a great answer, or not a good sign.
And you brought up great points too, that sometimes you might ask the questions, and if you're just asking a question that someone's not used to getting that question, the fact that they don't know right away maybe won't be a red flag, but depending on how they respond after that could become the red flag.
Yeah. And generally I don't know if I've ever, few times out of dozens have I seen somebody actually follow up with an answer on that question. And kind of the other more sinister aspect of this is, if you're in a competitive hiring interviewing process and you're asking this question, it can come off as if you're already asking about time away from work, time off, right? So they might also just take your resume and put it in the shredder. So it's like, oh, we don't want to deal with this. Let's move on to the next guy. So that's another goal of Friendly Forces, is to, again, put this out there so that the service members don't have to have these awkward conversations going in. We're doing that work for them on the front end to sort of, allow them to bypass that and just focus on the role and the company.
Yes, that slides into like our next little topic here, which, is some people might be a little hesitant to list their Guard or Reserve experience on their resume, particularly if they're still in the Guard or Reserve. It's one thing if you had it, it's all done. But should people be wary about putting this on their resume, or is there just tips of how they should put it on their resume? What do you think about that?
So that's a really good question. That's one I've had debates with people about in the past. So I'm friends with a prominent USERRA attorney. I've discussed this with him. His opinion is that yes, absolutely list it. You want to be the good employee. You want to be transparent. And I don't have any proof that I've ever been eliminated from a hiring process because that's on my resume. But I have gotten some kind of bizarre questions in the past that felt sort of illegal. I'm not an HR person, but questions like, oh, like how long are you going to be away for? Do you have any upcoming obligations coming up? And that can feel a little weird. I would equate it to asking a woman if she plans to get pregnant, right? You can't ask that. Or you can't use that to validate if somebody's a good candidate. So as far as listing it on your resume, I would defer to saying, yes, list it. Generally, people with that experience are going to have some pretty positive bullets on their resume for things they've done, training they've had. I don't have any data to support in any way that negatively affects people. But it is an open debate that I've seen reservists have whether or not to.
Yeah, and one of the things about it's a great thing about like your website there, Friendly Forces, is if you feel like they've got a good reputation already, you'll be less hesitant to put that stuff on your resume.
To list it. So I don't have the definitive answer on that. Of course, again, it tends to be, others, right? So me as a defense contractor, yeah, they're used to it. They get it. They know that the experience I'm bringing back, I can directly integrate in my role working for them, for my government or DoD clients. Now, if you're like an investor, it's not going to be super helpful for your career and your team. And, that's something that has to be managed.
So we've had some great topics here that we've talked about, Eric. You mentioned at the very beginning, you have a newsletter that kind of keeps people up to speed on what's going on. Part-time Hitter newsletter. Can they find that on LinkedIn, or what's the best way to find this newsletter and get connected to that?
Yeah, great question. I believe it's linked on our website, www.friendlyforces.org. You can also Google Part-Time Hitter newsletter. It should be one of the first things that comes up. We have a lot of fun with it. It used to be sort of more of a hobby project that we did from time to time. We've started really leaning into it to get it out weekly. It does have some great information. We have some big plans to do some more stuff with it, some partnerships coming up with different companies, with different service providers that basically will help reservists kind of optimize the two hats that they wear, both military and civilian career wise.
It's got a good vibe to it. Everything that you guys are doing over there, as I was prepping for this stuff, really looks very genuine. It looks like you're not just fluffing things up or blowing smoke up. You're in the military vernacular, it fits right in. I mean, it's the kind of stuff that I think people, if you're a guardsman or reservist, or even if you're active duty or a veteran, and you're thinking about doing that stuff, a lot of really good information in there, but it comes across as, like I said, it looks like it's genuine and good natured, but good stuff to know about.
Yeah, it's news, it's information, it's resources. There's a ton of great resources out there, a ton of great information that's highly relevant to reservists. But in this day and age, it's information overload, and a lot of great resources just don't trickle down to the people who need them. And I think anyone in the military knows that, right? Information tends to not always make it down to the lowest level. So we try to curate that information and put it on a weekly basis and do it in a way that's, hopefully maybe somewhat entertaining. And, there's some memes and some other things in there, but we found it's a great way to sort of directly engage with this audience, which I've always felt is largely overlooked in the greater sort of veteran conversation. Everyone's very focused and dedicated to helping veterans, right? But that tends to look like, okay, let's help people that used to be in the military that are no longer, and that's great. We need to help veterans get jobs and have gainful employment, but it overlooks people who are still doing both and the unique needs and challenges that they have. So basically we saw a gap and we're trying to fill that, and we're starting to get more meetings with decision makers in government and industry leaders to talk about these things. And as I said, it's more timely than ever with everything that's going on. So it feels like important work. We're very passionate about it, and just looking to amplify what we're doing.
But we just threw the link to Friendly Forces down in the chat section of the LinkedIn here, so you can find it right there. If you're not on LinkedIn, or if you're catching this later on, it's friendlyforces.org, friendlyforces.org. This is Eric Evans. Before we say goodbye, I do want to do time for a quick commercial. If you are watching us live and you're looking for new stuff, ClearedJobs.Net, which is where I work. We've got a job fair coming up November 6th in Dulles, Virginia. This is just for CI and full scope poly people, but you can find that on the ClearedJobs.Net website. So if you're a guardsman or reservist, if you're on here, if you've got that CI or the full scope poly and you want to start talking to some companies, it's a great place to do that. And if you've been watching this little video, you got some good questions to ask and some good things to start looking for. And maybe you can jump on that Friendly Forces website and see what kind of companies are listed, on there. And you know what, Eric, it sounds like if there's a company that they're working for, can they reach out to you if they want to be listed, if they're not on there? Like how does that work if someone?
Absolutely. That's how we end up listing a large number of our companies is the service member themselves tend to find the website. And if the company is super supportive, they are happy to reach out and say, hey, my company's been great. Please get them listed, and we list them. Conversely, what happens a good amount of the time is somebody will go to their HR, their employer, say, hey, we're not doing so hot. We could be doing better. There's this organization called Friendly Forces. You should reach out to them. So currently I'm working with about 6 companies developing white papers and recommendations for how they can elevate their policies. And again, that has immediate, direct, tangible benefit to reservists, to the service members in their workforce, to our national security, and ultimately to the companies themselves from a recruiting and retention aspect, from an optics, public relations aspect, and generally from a supporting the people, people first, values that most companies espouse. Yeah. So it's a win for everybody, truly.
I got to imagine if you're a recruiter and you have guards or reserve people in your organization, if you don't know who they are, you need to get to know who they are. Just so that you know that they're in your organization, you can ask them questions. And also, it sounds like a great tip that you're telling everybody, Eric, is if you happen to be a guards person or a reservist at your organization, don't wait for HR to come to you. Let them know, hey, Friendly Forces is here. They're like, let them know what's going on, because sometimes it just does come down to that the people who are in those conversations just don't know what they don't know. And it would be a shame if you had that answer and you just weren't there. So getting more guards folks and more reserve folks out there to engage in their particular companies is going to only help everybody in the long run.
Yeah. And what's funny too is, as I said, we're like the only organization that I know of that does this work. We're a nonprofit. Companies will often pay consulting companies to come in and do this type of work, but they're not subject matter experts. And a lot of the times the data they're going to be using, they're going to be going to our website and reaching out to me and asking if I can help them. So you can bypass that and just come directly to us, and we'll help you out, because we care about this mission, and we care about national security, and we care about people. So we've had great results with people transparently speaking with their HR folks and having them reach out and collaborating with them to see what we can do.
Well, hey man, it's been terrific to get a chance to talk to you, Eric. I've really enjoyed learning what you got going on at Friendly Forces. If people want to find you, of course, we're already on LinkedIn, so they can hit you up on LinkedIn, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. Like and subscribe.
There you go. Hey, that's what we've got today. We try to keep this to 30 minutes. There's a little bit of lunch and learn action on this Monday. So we want to thank Eric for being here. If you've got other questions or you want to reach out to him or me, let us know. But ClearedJobs.Net, we're happy to bring you some information about Friendly Forces and all that they've got going on. So thanks, Eric.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.